Hey, friends. I'm assuming that that is recording, so we'll see. Hey, I would normally ask how you're all doing. That feels like a tricky question these days. So, I am in my office. It's a beautiful Sunday and beautiful weather-wise. The sun is shining. Earth is waking up. There's so much color around here. Like it's really beautiful. And I'm popping in to say hi, first of all, to see actually how you're all doing. I'd love to hear. And to connect, basically. It's a weird time because part of me wants to be very, very present here and share and contribute in whatever way I can. And another part of me needs to, or feels this desire to go with the energy, the collective energy, the slowing down, the pausing, the taking care of myself, going on walks, all of those things. And I'm trying to sit with both and hold both. And I think now that I say that, this is pretty much what I'm popping in to share with you and to speak with you or to you about today. Sitting with polarity and what we do with seemingly conflicting energies and parts of ourselves and kind of things that are pulling us in different directions. How do we sit with all of that? And something that I've been noticing this week is that it's almost as if there are two different ways of responding to that, responding to what's happening for us. And as I've been noticing that, I was realizing that it really applies to everything. So what I'm talking about is that there is one side that, or one kind of response that is very much about what is actually happening around us, the physical, the tangible, the factual, and also the deep, visceral, primal, even deep-rooted emotion. And when we're in that space, there is the desire to check a lot of the details, to read the news a lot, to keep informed, to speak about those things. What can go wrong with that is that it can almost feel as if we're being swallowed up by the emotion. So it can feel like when we are inside the emotion and the emotional reaction, and there is no holding, there is no support to that emotion, and it's just running with the emotion in this way. We're very much in reactivity. And the tendency is to look for things that add to it, that feed into it. So when I'm in an anxiety or fear or panic or, there is the need, the urge to go and find something, reach for something. And often the something that we reached for reinforces and adds to what I'm already feeling and makes it bigger rather than calming it down or responding to it in some way. Now, as I say that, something that I really want to put out there is that I'm not coming from a place of wanting to share things from an idealistic or perfectionistic perspective, or like this is the right thing to do, and there's a lot that feels like it. that energy feels present to me, and I don't want to share that. So there's no right or wrong way. All of us are going to find ourselves in that space, and it's fine. And we're going to lose our ground and lose our holding and like be in reactivity completely. And that's absolutely fine. So I'm not coming here from a place of telling you what to do to be a good something, a good healer, a good person interested in self-development or growth or whatever. Like, that's not my point. So all of that is going to happen. I'm coming more from a place of wanting to offer a different perspective, hoping that that can be helpful. But all of that is part of what we're experiencing, and it's okay. So one of the approaches is that, like, being deep down into the emotion and often drowning in it. And the other approach is the exact opposite, the approach of moving out, zooming out. And I often feel that the zooming in and zooming out analogies can be quite helpful. So the other approach is the zooming out approach, going into the overview, the bigger picture, the more expanded perspective that can range from philosophical, political, social, economic to spiritual, cosmic, metaphysical, and everything in between. And when we're in that energy, we're more removed from the day to day and the nitty gritty and the more personal stuff. And we're looking at the bigger picture, and we can understand or try to understand and find the meaning in it, and find, which can really give us hope. Yeah, and we long for meaning. Meaning is a big need that we have. So zooming out and going into that place, and this message gets communicated in many different ways, often, especially from a more spiritual perspective. It can come with I'm just going to use some cliche phrases. So, high vibes only, being out of fear and into love, love and light, etc. And all of that is fine and great too. It's not that that doesn't hold a grain of truth. But what feels to me that it's not helpful at all is when those approaches, those two ways and two almost levels of existence, states of being inside our bodies and our systems, get shared in a very split way. So it's a neither or. They're mutually exclusive. It's either being deep down into the emotional, reactive, primal self, and not without any support or holding, or being up there, being removed, being in that state of the mind, because that really has a lot to do with the mind and spirit, and kind of removed from that. And it's an either or situation. And when we're up here, like, I'm sure you have heard of the term spiritual bypassing, that as I say that, like, I have strong feelings about that, mostly because I've experienced it deeply and for a long time. And I've experienced the harm that can come from it. And I also have a lot of compassion for our need, for what can drive it, what can fuel it, which is another, spiritual bypassing is another coping mechanism. It's just, has this a layer of more evolved or more sophisticated mechanism, which can make it much more difficult to pinpoint. So, et cetera, et cetera. But I have a lot of compassion for needing to use that, because temporarily in the moment or more long term, it does make us feel better. But when we're up here, to only stay here and to only have high vibes only and love and light means that in most cases that we need to disconnect from what's happening down in the rest of our bodies, like from the more purely emotional animal self, more primal self, like more unconscious self as well. And that's not helpful. So I'm coming from a place of, okay, we have those two extremes in a sense, two ends of the spectrum, and they do get expressed these days in a more, or in what I'm saying, in a more split way. And there's thankfully many voices that also speak about bridging the two. So this is what I want to speak to you about also. How do we hold both of them? How do we hold two seemingly conflicting, opposing senses or parts of ourselves? How do we make space of both without negating or suppressing either of the two? And how do we bridge them also? How do we bring them together? And as I speak, I'm moving. And so my movement is intentional in the sense that I want to take a moment to bring those states into the body and look at it from an energy system, chakra perspective, and psychospiritual perspective on what's happening from that place. So when we speak of the emotional, also animal, like self, the feeling self, the even the human self, right? The more personal human, real life, day to day, all of that. We're speaking about the lower body, and we're speaking about the root, sacral, and navel or solar plexus chakras, energy centers. So this is one part. This is the part that responds to what's happening in our personal lives. And in our personal lives right now, I want to say everything, but a lot has changed for all of us. There's so much, like from one day to the next, so much has changed. Nothing is the same. And we're being called to respond and to adjust to that. And that can feel really scary to that part of us, especially in our root center. Is so much about stability. It's about grounding. It's about continuity and safety. And that's getting rocked. That's getting shaken. And then our emotional self, and all of that, that's more personal. It's our human self. All of that is changing. It's impossible for a response to not be there. And then when we speak about the more removed perspective, we're speaking about the higher part of the body, like throat up. We're speaking a lot about the mind, thought, meaning, perception, understanding, symbolism, expression and communication on that level, like this part. And as we speak about that, I want to bring in a tool from transactional analysis, which is a triangle. Imagine a triangle that speaks to the three, or brings together three different parts of ourselves that we all have. And so in the lower corners of the triangle, there is the child and the parent. And at the top of the triangle, there is the adult or adult. And if we take that and apply it to what we're speaking about, this lower part of the body, the feeling part, is the child. So the inner child, the child inside of each and every one of us, that feels what's happening, is very scared right now, or might be very scared. I don't want to impose anything also, but it makes sense that it would feel scared. And depending, and that's the other thing, like depending on our personal experience and background and histories, that part of ourselves, the feeling part of ourselves, the part that holds our needs, our desires, and is really in that space of speaks emotional language and body language, does not speak the language of the mind, is the part that responds emotionally to what's happening. So we have that's very, very personal. And as I was saying, at some point this week, everybody's responding to that differently. And a lot of that has to do with our background. A lot of that has to do with our experience and our history and our traumas and wounds and, strengths in terms of support and all those things that have been there from before, that we've been carrying with us. So that's the part that responds in this way, that's feeling the whole range of emotion. And then when we speak about perspective, when we speak about looking for the meaning, looking for what good might come out of this situation, looking at those things, we're speaking about the parent. So this higher part of the body is the parent self. The parent knows good and bad, right and wrong, can kind of contemplate and reflect and evaluate and assess and make judgments, and holds all our beliefs in a sense, and our worldviews and all those things. Now, what happens when there's those two parts inside ourselves and they can become very split? When when we're fully into the child and kind of being swallowed up, being the child that feels quite helpless very often, right? And the child as a child is helpless, meaning that the part inside ourselves that embodies, that holds our child self, is helpless, because it's almost as if it lives back then. It's not our adult self. So that part, when we're down there, we're losing perspective. We can also lose connection. We can, and it doesn't also matter very much. Because when we come from the parent and try to respond to the child, there is often a dismissive attitude. Like we kind of suppress the child rather than respond to it. We pretend that it's not even there. And so we can only be here. Or imagine the parent going to meet the child and tell it, share its worldview and how it sees the world, and come from the mind. The child doesn't speak this language. So when we come from the parent perspective that says, this is what we have to do, and this is why this is okay, and this is why you shouldn't be afraid. You have no reason to be afraid because this and this and that is happening. The child doesn't feel any better because it's not being met. It's not being seen. There is no response to what the child is feeling. It's just being left aside and alone. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. So nobody's responding to that. So when we come from that love light, it's all good, etc., perspective, we're disconnecting. We have to put the child, lock it up in a closet and be up here. Speaking of bridging, and of bringing the two together, since our lower three energy centers are the realm of the child and the how or the human self, right? And the higher energy centers are the realm of the parent. What is in between? In between, we have the heart. And we're looking for the bridge. So when we bring it to the body, it makes sense that the heart is at the center. And it can bridge the two. And it's interesting speaking about the heart these days, because from different perspectives, there's a lot that has to do with the heart. And, you know, starting from the virus, but also the central core message of the virus and what it's brought up to the surface, that's nothing else than compassion and kindness and the need for that, the need to come from the heart. If we are to come out of that all together. So there's a lot that has to do with the heart that's coming in. So the heart is the physical and the energetic bridge between higher and lower. And what the heart holds from more of a psychological, possibly psychological, psychospiritual perspective, but in terms of the child and the parent, the heart is the seat of the adult in the triangle, right in the middle. As I say that, I've also had in mind how, you know, Jung has spoken so much about the tension of the opposites, like holding opposites together, and how the whole individuation journey is about holding, sitting in the tension of the opposites and holding those opposites, those polarities, and letting them interact. And that links back to alchemy as well, like the two principles, the two opposites that come together, and not necessarily very peacefully all the time, but they come together and they interact, and through their interaction, there is a third principle that rises out of that. So here, the third principle we're talking about is the adult, the adult. That comes from the heart. And I want to speak a little bit about what's different between the adult and the parent. So when the adult comes forth, what it wants to do is to lean into the child, like not lean into exactly, but reach out to the child, go meet the child, like listen, connect to the child. It doesn't say no. It doesn't shame or blame the child. It doesn't ignore the child. It goes in and says, hey, I'm here. I see you. So basically, it holds space for the child. It's not identifying with the child, because then drowning is more possible. But it's there, and it's the paradox that's very much part of mindfulness as well. The paradox of witnessing, holding, containing, and feeling at the same time. That's another duality. So this is what the adult does. Comes in, connects, say, hey, I'm here. And connects emotionally to the child. That's really important. It connects emotionally. It doesn't come from the mind. It doesn't come from a place of should. It doesn't come from a place of this is the right thing that you have to do, and this is what you should be feeling, what you shouldn't be feeling. No. It says, hey, I see you. I see you're struggling right now. I'm here. And I'm here. I can hold space for you. I can hold you. And And this is the difference between the adult and the parent, right? I said before, what the parent would do would come in and say, this is not very helpful. Like, we're not doing this. Let's do something else. Let's think about it this way. Let's move away from there. So that's the difference with the adult holding. And then it can also bring in everything that the parent holds. So the adult is like the mediator between the parent and the child. And so bringing the two together and holding this overview, the larger perspectives, the cosmic, the spiritual, the political, the social, the economic, all of that, holding it and bringing it in as support to what is actually happening to the child, like as an extra layer of support, not at the expense of our feelings and emotions, not as an either or. And there's a big difference when we bring it in, like surrounding, embracing this connection with the child, rather than going up there and leaving the child down here, our real human self down here. I'd love to invite you, as I say that, I'd love to invite you to really feel that in your body. Like, feel the lower part of your body and all of those emotions that can come up, and the higher, the upper part of your body. And then this adult, the holding principle, the balancing principle, the bridge between the two. And the other thing I wanted to bring in is that in my experience, actually I have two things on my mind. One is that what I'm describing is the soul perspective. So soul for me is bringing the two together, is having this connection with the beyond, but not exiting, not escaping the human to go find spirit somewhere else. It's about really drawing down spirit to come into the body and support and be applied, in a sense, to whatever is happening down here in our physical bodies, in the here and now, in our real lives. That's the difference with soul. Like, soul for me is the bridge. It's another word for heart. Heart is said to be the seat of the soul. So this is the function. The other thing I wanted to say is that really, in my experience, the deepest, most important, most true, the truest spiritual experiences and messages and whatever words we might use, have come from going down into the physical and into the human and interacting with that and being there and doing this work. And as we work through the human, when we can meet ourselves where we need to be met and offer ourselves the support that we need, there is a very natural emergence of spiritual knowing. I think knowing is important here. Not spiritual belief, not opinion, not views or anything or theories, but spiritual knowing that comes from the bottom up. And these have been the most meaningful experiences of my life. This is the spirituality I'm interested in. This is the spirituality I stand for, that is very much grounded and rooted into what is happening in our human physical bodies, what is happening moment to moment. And this is where we find our lessons from experience. This is how we grow spiritually, by going deep down to meet ourselves there. So, I really can feel that in my body, and yeah, I'm sitting in that. This is also a big part behind the program, the Your Body Speaks Your Soul program. This is a big part behind all of my work, really. Not just the program, like, but especially that, like, this is the idea. Your body speaks your soul, speaks to that exactly, like bridging the two. This is my big desire, my big intention behind this program. Bridging the two, the material and the spiritual and the psychospiritual, bringing them all together and realizing that they are one and the same. And just finding the ways, the tools and the practices and the understanding that can support this experience of wholeness. And then it's really about wholeness versus compartmentalization. Okay. So that was the few things I had to say. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear how this sits with you. There are a few things I'm preparing that I'm going to be sharing tomorrow and on Tuesday, which are opportunities for us to come together and practice exactly on what I was just talking about, like doing that, trying to do that together in different ways. So, yes, I'm going to be back very soon. I hope you're doing well. Again, in whatever way feels good to you to take care of yourself. I hope you're doing that and making space for not doing that, for doing whatever you can in each moment. I'm here. I'd love to hear anything that you have to share, and I'll see you very soon.